ACM SIGGRAPH Webinar on working from home for the animation and visual effects industries. I'm your host. My name is Troy Brooks. I'm the Vice President of Technology for Wildbrain Studios in Vancouver. I'd just like to read a couple of things to introduce us to the process here. This first webinar is organized by the Canadian ACM SIGGRAPH chapters with the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So we'd like to thank them for their help in putting this together. There's some rules up front that all the participants and the public are asked to abide by, and I'll just read them first. The live stream will be moderated by our team. We ask that all comments stay respectful of others and respect ACM's policy against harassment. This means to exercise consideration and respect in your speech and actions, refrain from demeaning, discriminating, or any harassing behavior in speech, and to be mindful of your fellow participants. Don't think that's a high bar to meet. No intimidating, harassing, abusive, discriminatory, derogatory, or demeaning speech or actions by any participant will be tolerated, which seems only fair. So with that out of the way, I'd like to introduce our panel. First up is Michael Ford. Michael's the Senior Vice President of Software Development and Systems Engineering for Sony Pictures Imageworks. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
Hello, everybody.
Next up is Luke Groves. Luke is the Global Head of Production for Mr. X in Toronto. Luke?
Hi, everybody.
Thanks for coming here. And last but not least, Krista Tazio-Morson, VP of Sales and Post-Production and Visual Effects Producer for Deluxe. Krista, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Troy. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Now that we have all that out of the way, let's shake hands. No hits below the belt. Come out fighting. So I'd like to start by asking Michael, just basic plan. Obviously, nobody saw this particular pandemic, this particular situation coming. But did you have a disaster recovery plan set up to cover cases where your entire studio suddenly may be forced to work from home?
Yeah, so Sony as a corporation has what's called a business continuity plan that we run and basically prepare. We were actually working on it and updating it while this actually happened. So we kind of went from potentially running a scenario where it was just going to be a drill to not a drill, right? And the interesting thing about it is that the pandemic portion of, like, if there was going to be something that was going to go wrong, whether it was an earthquake or a fire or any other calamity, pandemic was not on the top of the list, right? So it turned into, okay, how do we manage this specific issue as it comes up? So yeah, we do have one, and the good thing is we actually were able to run it and talk with people about it. And now we're, obviously we're going to update it to deal with pandemics, but it definitely served us well.
Now, did you feel like it although you weren't planning for a pandemic, that it covered the scope of the issues that have arisen so far, or were there any surprises in there?
Well, I think with any scenario where you're not expecting, or it kind of comes out of the blue, really what you're focused on is communication. So directories of who's making decisions, how do we communicate, how do we gather together, and then how do we distribute that information to people? Because I think that's the most important thing when stuff starts happening. You need to be able to make sure that you're communicating effectively to your teams and obviously to the people that are in your company. And I think that that's what a business continuity plan does, is it allows you to think ahead of who's going to talk about this, how do we get that information down to our people? If we can't contact them, how do we make sure they're okay? All those things are super important about making sure that your business can continue, and obviously keeping the health and safety of the people that you're working with, as a primary concern.
Yeah. I'd like to direct this next question to Luke, because I know, Luke, that you're probably, like other panelists, dealing with international communication with overseas studios. How did you find the change in shifting to work from home had an impact on that?
Just like Mike said, communication is key, and you know, we strive ourselves on having as clear communication and open lines of communication as possible between all of our sites, and that's been amplified by virtue of the COVID situation. So all of the communications that we do day to day in person have moved into the virtual space. Over the course of the past 2 months, these video calls and video conferences at first may have felt a little bit unnatural, but every day that goes by and every call that goes by, it does increase the natural sense of the communication face to face. And that's something that, you know, when we go back to the office, we are going to continue to implement, because working in a global company, this level of communication, you know, direct but far apart, is the best way to strengthen the team.
Yep, that's a good point. Krista, you have any thoughts on this issue? What were Deluxe's plans going in, and how did they manifest as it evolved?
Well, similarly, you know, we certainly had disaster plans in place, but I don't think that, you know, for an issue quite like this and the scale that this pandemic had. So I think that the team, you know, had to pivot pretty quickly to put protocols in place, communication plans in place, both, you know, location-based and then globally based. You know, Deluxe Toronto and Deluxe Visual Effects as a department within Deluxe Toronto as part of a larger company, you know, with locations around the world. And quickly we had to, you know, really lean on each other. And as different jurisdictions, you know, were going down, again, it was being flexible and being able to pivot quickly so that we could continue to service the clients that wanted and needed to continue, and then also to quickly ramp down on projects that were shutting down.
So, open question for the group: How many of you had staff working at home already? For what percentage of your group was this already a fait accompli?
In terms of ImageWorks, we had a really small population that was working from home. I mean, you know, most of our artists, you know, in terms of being, you know, either in both our locations, both in Vancouver and Los Angeles, the greater percentage of them were always, you know, in the studio, right? That's from communication standpoint, from a security standpoint, all those things are factored in. So really limited, but I would say that, you know, this has obviously changed that.
for us at Mr. X, I wouldn't say working from home specifically, but working remotely is something that we do time and time again. On-set supervision is a primary service that we provide to our clients, and those techniques and methodologies and workflows and processes that we've continued to develop over the years and improve the remote work experience has translated to the work from home experience.
Yeah, jumping in, I mean, I'd say similarly, you know, it's the same situation. We did have some of our team, you know, working remotely in different capacities, and I think the, you know, visual effects industry sort of at large has been, you know, used to working in a remote facet as the industry globalized. So, you know, I think that we were in a good position to take some of those remote models and deploy them on a larger scale quite quickly.
Now, did you find, again, for the group, obviously there's a lot of data involved in all of these processes and, you know, large central storage and render farms. Did you find you had to shift your pipeline or your data model much to accommodate people needing that data at home, or were you able to adapt to a more remote control workflow?
For us at Mr. X, to maintain our level of efficiency, we had to create parity with our production pipeline remotely. And our solution, you know, if you have 50 megabits up and 10 megabits down, you can work sufficiently and efficiently. So, you know, we joke that if you can stream Netflix you can work from home for Mr. X. We needed it to be simple. We needed it to be fast. We needed it to be as similar as possible, because if we have to start changing production pipelines and workflows while we're in this situation, it's going to slow down the work. And our goal was to get people working as efficiently in small numbers and scale those up as every day that passed over the course of the state of emergency. And so after the first day, we had a small group working from home, and then within 2 weeks, we had the whole facility. So it was maintain the same process in a small sandbox, quote unquote, and then scale that up as we find that it continues to work, and then build on it quickly.
One of the things we were discussing just before we went live was the last mile problem. And Krista, you had some thoughts on how that had an effect on people's ability to work in the new paradigm.
Yeah, correct. I mean, we were triaging, just as Luke was mentioning there, just, what artists and services did we have to get up, working remotely as quickly as possible. And so we, quickly deployed individuals and some smaller groups as quickly as we could. And what we were finding was that you learn a lot about, where your artists live, and whether it's, in the city or in a rural area outside of the city, and what their bandwidth and connectivity is in those areas. And as much as we could, enable them to increase their internet bandwidth instantaneously or within an hour by getting on the phone with one of the telcos, there was some areas that just, we weren't able to increase that connectivity. I had mentioned that the City of Toronto and Mayor Tory has been a huge support during this time for our industry. I sit on the film board, and he quickly dived in, and his team, to working directly with the telecommunication companies to help our industry, recognizing that this was a particular hotspot issue for us that needed to be remedied pretty quickly. And the telcos did respond, and were engaging with a subgroup to help rectify it. So for us, that was a big help.
I think actually that touches on an issue that I'm very fond of reflecting on, which is the degree to which the Canadian industry in particular has a really good community. Like you, I sit on some boards and panels here in Vancouver, and the way that the studios were able to come together and talk about, how we're solving these technical issues and reach out to government as a unified group to say, these are the ways that you can help us. These are the things, because it's one of the industries that's continuing at fairly high employment, at least for now. And, it's a helpful thing from their perspective as well. But I think that ability to collaborate has been useful. Have you worked amongst yourself? Have you found a lot of interaction with the other studios in Toronto or Michael in Vancouver?
Well, I'll just say that the Toronto community is pretty tight. And I think that, whether we have friends or past colleagues or even, studio owners and leaders, that there's certainly been a lot of community dialogue happening, whether it's, through the city, individually, the province obviously has been a big supporter of our industry as well. So I think in times like this, you lean on your friends and family. And your friends extend out to industry partners.
And the level of support from our clients, from our managers, from our staff, from our government, and from our other studios in our community, it's been tremendous. No one's officially sitting down per se and how do we do this together, but everyone is chasing the same goal, and everybody's lending a helping hand. And it's been pretty incredible to see that level of support come out in such a time of need and crisis.
Yeah, I think, just to echo those statements, I think that obviously the communities, both in the United States and Canada, the VFX communities, animation communities, from a system standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, those connections to government are super important, especially in this scenario where there is so much information that needs to get distributed and get distributed quickly. And it is pretty dynamic in terms of how it changes. And during, when everything was sort of happening, by the hour, where you would see something else happen, having that connection with people and knowing that they're going through the same thing, it really showcases the community that we have.
Now, in terms of connections with our clients, obviously a lot of the projects we work on are a fairly tight security regimen because nobody wants anything to leak. And all of a sudden, we have to tell our clients, yes, all your stuff is going home. It's going to 1,000 different people in 1,000 different places, and their moms and their roommates and everybody else will be standing behind them looking at it. What kinds of changes in your security model, if any, or what arrangements did you have to make to accommodate this new reality?
As you said, we're the business of creating content that's fundamentally secret. So security is all of our top priority. In this situation, the new issue that came up is just explaining those measures to our clients and educating them on the plan so that there was full transparency. In all cases, we move forward in their partnership, and that continues to go today. Every time we make a delivery, everything is as secure as possible, and we have the client's approval on our workflow.
Yeah, I think the key with security is obviously it's all encompassing, right? So you have to have both, specifically in this scenario where you really have to have trust, and I think that part of that trust is the transparency piece. Is obviously keeping your clients informed, keeping them up to date as to the types of changes that we were going to make in terms of the environment, but it's also the trust on the artist side as well. And I think that's super important to kind of keep echoing, is that this is happening, right? But we want to make sure that we can obviously continue to do this. And so making sure that the artists know is that it's just as it was in the building, it's just as important at home. And that's really fundamental to how we operate as a business and how we operate in the visual effects and animation community. So it's up to everyone, and it's equally as important for the artists to realize that as well.
I absolutely agree. I mean, each of the artists is a consummate professional, and really that security and confidentiality, really just extended from the studio to their home working environment. Obviously there was protocols and reminders and discussions, that were, had and put in place. But I think that all of the artists and the team have, stepped up for that individual responsibility, and recognize that this is our craft, this is our profession, this is what we do, and that professionalism, what has been consistent and will be consistent, throughout. And I'd say that it's a big kudos to our clients as well for that leap of faith, that trust, that they've put us, and really it speaks to them, partnering with us as an industry and treating us, and respecting our relationship as we partner and create content together.
No, I think that's an excellent point about reminders. I know everybody signs an NDA and is briefed in the security protocols, and yet still we wind up having issues having to remind people, no, you can't post on social media about what you're working on. That's not how this works at all. That doesn't change when everybody goes home. But yeah, it's a good point that it's just a reminder. Nothing has changed. We need to maintain a level of security. Did any of you find that you had to make changes in your production pipeline? And I'll speak from personal experience here. We had typically gone with centrally installed applications, much easier to do version control and deployment. But when we were concerned that the city might shut down, we sent everybody's workstation home with them. And now we've started bringing them back and deploying Teradici modules. But we wound up going to a local install model, which was a lot more labor intensive for our IT teams, but really improved performance over trying to draw applications over VPN. Were there changes that you found you had to make in your pipelines as you went through this process?
For us, our pipeline is the same as at home as it is in the studio. The fundamental difference is the level of communication and not being able to do it face to face. There's no experience like sitting in a screening room with your team, reviewing shots, collaborating creatively, riffing on the work and the imagery that's on the screen, and then taking that and kind of compartmentalizing it and moving it to the virtual space. So how do you create similar experiences is something that we continue to push on. So maintaining our daily structure the same as it is now, albeit virtually, and finding solutions to do that so the collaboration can continue. That's the main difference for us is just the way we communicate. And every day that goes by, we continue to find different mechanisms and ways to improve that. But maintaining the structure that we had in the studio is really been a key for us.
Yeah, I think our biggest change, because just like Luke, our pipeline really didn't change at all. So all we did was take the system that we had internally and then put it out into people's houses. I think the main thing that changed was how we interact with our clients. In the case of, whether it's an external client or an internal client of, someone that normally would just come into the building and be looking at it in a theater with us, that obviously had to change, right? So coming up with systems that allowed them to sort of replicate that experience was important for us, and that's something we focused on really early on. And are obviously continuing to look at ways of improving that experience for the clients that we work with.
Deluxe Toronto, I mean, similarly, our actual pipeline is intact and in place, and was really just migrated to the work from home mentality, and it's really the communication that Luke was mentioning that I think shifted for us, to that virtual space where you're running daily scrums, departmental scrums in a virtual space, rather than live and in person. And I was mentioning when we were just chatting before that I think that, the virtual space has been great for some people that might, tend to be shy and maybe not contribute, as much as possible in a live setting. But in a virtual setting, there's a certain comfort. So I think that, the onus has also been on our supervisors and department leads to help draw out, personalities and communication in those virtual spaces. And, any of the feedback that I've gotten is that it's been, very positive and collaborative for people.
One of the things that I know the groups in Vancouver have been talking about is sharing tricks and tips about kind of maintaining a positive mental attitude and mental health. A lot of studios have been running yoga classes online or Friday drink sessions where everybody can log in and chat and collaborate. Have your studios made use of that? Do you find that has helped improve the way that people interact with video conferencing in general? I know we were all saying earlier that it's an onus sometimes. It's difficult sometimes to be on and be performative for these video conferences. You find that these social actions, if any, have helped kind of lubricate that process?
100%. It's the communication creature comfort, so to speak, that we chase after, whether it's getting a coffee and having a quick chat, going to lunch with friends, beer on Fridays. We try to move as many of those things to the virtual space as possible. We have, we like to see everybody's pets. We do a weekly pet update, so we know who's keeping good company at home. And those kinds of things to kind of replace the spontaneous interactions that you may have in the office, but to do it virtually, and also not focus on work. I mean, we talk to each other about how things are going outside of work in the office, and immediately when we went home, you kind of stopped doing that. It's like all business all day. And so you got to take a step back and kind of bridge that virtually and allow room for those direct interactions.
Yeah, I think you have to double down, I think, on that communication. I think it's that's what we've been talking about internally, is that it almost takes twice the effort in order to sort of make it feel almost natural in a way, which sounds, it sounds like it shouldn't go that way, but what we're missing is that connections in the hallways, and what we're missing is that, we're not seeing each other every day face to face. We've been at ImageWorks, we've been working basically remotely for a long time, and that we had 2 studios, and so we've maintained connections over video conference for a long time. But when everybody has to do it, you miss the connection in your local office, and I think that has really made our teams work on things that, Luke was talking about with, pet days, crazy hat days, dress up days, those types of things. And they actually really do matter. They really create that culture that is important for you to continue to foster. So, but it takes effort, right? So.
Yeah, and another interesting thing that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Troy.
No, I was just agreeing. Go ahead.
I was just going to say another interesting thing is that the more time that passes, the more comfortable people get, and the amount of people's husbands, wives, partners, children, pets that we've got to meet. Like they're our extended family. They know what we do, and a lot of us take work home, or we work, a lot of hours, and they're very familiar with our process. And it's been really nice to kind of spread this experience across those people and get to put faces to names that we haven't met before, and feel more of a support team with our extended family.
Absolutely. I think that, culture has been top of mind for everyone trying to, maintain that studio culture and build on it. And, first and foremost, that we're people, we're moms, dads, sisters, brothers, friends before, we're visual effects and animators, visual effects artists and animators and producers. So I think that, certainly there's been that level of, camaraderie that our company and all the companies have seemed to, want to bring together.
Obviously, going forward, nobody really knows what's going to happen in the short term. I think in the long term, we hope things will return to some semblance of normal. But I know that we've been having a lot of discussions about what is the new normal. Have you all been receiving feedback from your artists about whether they want to come back or whether they're looking for a modified way of coming back? Or, in the short term, obviously, there are health concerns, and I'm interested to hear what you're hearing from people on that. But in the longer term, this whole new paradigm's kind of opened up the possibilities of what a studio looks like. Who has thoughts on that?
Right now, it's very simple for us. It's once we follow the government regulations, and when there is the opportunity to go back to the office, it's going to be return to work if you have to, work from home if you can. We want to continue to provide this option as long as our clients are allowing us to do so. And this could progress for months, and we need to be open and agile to continue to navigate the duration that it's going to take to remedy.
Do you find that people are interested in coming back, or keen to come back, or are they still, again, health concerns aside, but are they saying, well, when this is over, I'd like to get back in the studio? Or are they saying, I'm not missing that commute at all. I think I could make this work long term.
Everybody has their own situation, and we're open to everybody's situation. There are people that can't wait to get back and have those interactions and have that level of social interaction with their coworkers. Our business is an artistic endeavor, and that's social by nature. So there is a craving to do that. But then there is the people that have childcare issues or elder care issues or other circumstances where this has actually benefited them. So definitely, there's a hybrid to all of this in the quote unquote new normal.
Yeah,
I think that oh, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Sorry. I totally agree. I think it's an individual sort of process that people are going through. And I think it's going to be an individual process going back and making decisions. And obviously there's a lot that depends on the clients. There's a lot that depends on obviously the studio needs. But I think we're looking at options of how do we provide the best experience for our teams, and how do we benefit from this in a way? What are we learning? How is it going to improve our process, not only culturally but obviously from a production standpoint? And like you said, the health and safety of the people that work for us is paramount. We have to make sure that it's a safe environment for people to work in, and that's full stop. So that's kind of where we're starting from, and then we can obviously look and see what's going to happen as things kind of happen day by day.
I think that, the work-life balance has been something that every industry has been striving for, for a long time. And I think that there's definitely been some advantages here where, you maybe have a little bit of that, but then maybe you don't. Because some people, have been working longer hours just by the nature of, being on all the time in a virtual space. Yeah. There's no start and stop to your particular day. So, I would agree that it's really on an individual sort of basis as to, where the advantages and disadvantages lie. And I think it really comes down to, how do we serve our clients, moving forward? Is there, the good things we can take from this to add, whether it's through efficiencies or opening up the availability of talent in, remote areas by working from home. Or other production efficiencies that we can kind of pass back, or cultural efficiencies that we can let our employees take advantage of by having a more flexible day. Perhaps new moms get to sort of bridge their work day. I think it's all up for discussion, and there's no set plan in place. It's just TBD. Let's see what goes. Let's see how we shape this new normal together.
I don't think any of us would have moved into this paradigm absent this kind of situation, but having had it arrived, yeah, I think you all raised good points about, well, let's leverage what we can out of it. If we can have more flexible working arrangements for people, clearly we've established it can work. If somebody had said, can you have a whole studio of 500-600 people work from home? Well, I don't think anyone, oh, yeah, you can. Yeah, you can, because everybody in the world is doing it now. So there's that question answered. So the question is, I guess, how do you go forward? We're getting some questions from the public now. Can any of you speak to what you're doing to start planning for a return for people when they either want to because of their home situation or because their position requires it? Speaking for myself, we're starting to look at very phased kind of returns. People who are very keen to respond, people who we got a 1-bedroom apartment, we've got a toddler, we've, both work at home. I've got to get the hell out of here and get into the studio as soon as possible. And so we want to accommodate those people, but make sure we're following all the guidelines laid out by the government. And those can be very different from BC to Ontario to Quebec. They're, depending on the situation, can be very different. Can you talk a little about what you're thinking there?
I think everybody's dealing with a similar kind of phased solution to this, following government guidelines, and ourselves included. We are, like I said before, we're not in a rush. We are functioning. We are going to focus on the health and safety and well-being of our staff while maintaining operations. Those are the two things that need to coalesce in order to keep this business going. And whether we're doing it remotely or in the office during this period, there will be a hybrid. And we look at those people that must return to work by virtue of their efficiency, they're not having the same equipment at home to do their job at the full capacity and those specific areas. But it will be a staged hybrid solution that we will be focusing on the safety of our staff and their personal situation.
Yeah, I think we're analyzing, just like Luke was saying, we're analyzing what is feasible from a governmental standpoint, regional, and obviously from a corporation standpoint. We have to adhere to what the policies are that are created at all those levels, and then we get down to the individual, like I was saying before. So needs and demands of individual people is obviously important, but we also have to factor in, like, what are the production needs? Obviously, projection is a big thing. So we deal with images that need to be seen on a really big scale. Looking at a monitor at home is not the same as looking at looking at something in your house. So it's things like that we're obviously looking at, and how do we accommodate those needs and really make sure that obviously the product that we're delivering is top notch, and obviously making sure that from an individual basis we're meeting their needs as well.
Yeah, if you're doing 4K or 4K stereo, those just compound the issues of working at home. That doesn't make anybody's life easier.
Yep.
Oh, I would say that for us, I mean, with our post, services, certainly there was hurdles to, overcome to working in a remote capacity, some of which you just mentioned, working 4K, 4K HDR. We were able to, deploy all of our online editorial, our colorists, as well as our mixers in a remote capacity. And that was definitely, some big leaps and bounds in terms of posts. I think that, similarly, some of those services will need to migrate back into a DI theater at some particular point in time. So, with our phased approach, we're really, monitoring the obviously the guidelines that are put in place by the government in each jurisdiction, and then how do we phase that, keeping security and safety top of mind, both for ourselves and for our clients, but then also trying to get into those facilities as early as we can, as safely as we can, in order to further deliver at those higher resolutions.
One of the things that we sort of alluded to earlier is this notion of the future of work not necessarily looking like it was before. A return to normal isn't necessarily going to be the status quo. And one of the things that really informs our industry is the system of tax incentives that are driven by location, by person's residence in various locations. And this incident has kind of opened up the notion that you can expand your staff to include more far-flung people. What do you think about the possibility of that having an impact on the tax infrastructure or on the regulatory infrastructure for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question because it's, a lot of it is obviously driven from either the provincial level and even at a regional level. So I think that just needs to be a conversation, right? I don't think anybody was, and it's obviously a conversation that needs to happen and will happen because nobody was expecting this, right? So it's not like you anticipated, that this was going to come and we could prepare for it and plan for it. But now that the landscape has changed, I think it all starts with a conversation of like, what does it mean for the industry and what does it mean for, the provinces and obviously the regional areas that are impacted by this.
And I think it's not just a visual effects or a film industry issue. I think we're seeing that this is, in the tech industries and all the industries that have big workforces working in remote locations, or global companies that have satellite studios across the world. So I think it's a conversation that's going to permeate through a lot of industries and a lot of businesses for the next couple of years to see how we can globalize workforces.
Absolutely. I think, I would agree with both of you. And I think that, that the larger driver of what we do is really the creative, that we deliver to the screen. And I think that those partnerships, always supersede, the bottom line to a degree. I mean, that's obviously part of it and, can be used as a tool to help facilitate the creative for our clients. But, I think that that transparency, that discussion, to be had as to how do we, attain the budget by delivering the creative that our clients are after is really what's going to drive the solutions.
Yeah, I think we've all been working towards trying to build the best teams we can, drawing from people, from all over the world. We've done a lot of work with immigration to expand the network of people available in this country. But yeah, I think it's interesting to reflect on the degree to which they don't necessarily have to be concentrated in the same urban centers. That, a lot of the things like here in BC, studios have set up satellite offices 400 or 500 kilometers out of town with small incentives from the cities and counties there to incent them to set up those things. And those seem to be a lot more viable and drawing on international freelancers under the same structure. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. Sorry, just watching some of the questions come in from our studio audience. What was the most unexpected aspect of this whole thing? I mean, obviously there were a lot of logistic issues, a lot of, unexpected technical constraints, but what for you was the thing that was most surprising now that you've been up and running for a while and reflecting on, okay, this is kind of the new normal? What's most interesting to you about how it came about?
Well, one of the things that I found interesting, and it just never clicked before, was that people don't have computers in their houses these days. So there's a lot of people, with their smartphones, tablets, that don't have a workstation or a laptop in the house. In the age of cord cutting, it was like we deploy people and you start to realize, like, I don't actually have a computer in my home. So then we it's one thing to create the access back in the studio, but then to actually look to deploying equipment to service them. I found that to be something that just didn't cross our minds until it was happening.
No, I think that's a generational thing too. I think a lot of younger people are just, I have Wi-Fi and a tablet. I don't know what you're talking about. Plug into what? Was there? Yeah, it's definitely a different mindset.
We definitely had that conversation relative to, well, what if people don't have internet at home because they just use their phone, right?
Yeah.
So, generationally knowing that, I mean, I've always had a computer in my house, right? So it's just something that I've always had, and I probably always will, but not everybody does. I mean, I think the main thing that stuck out for me was just the speed of people adapting to the work from home. Like, getting them up to speed and getting them home and working was actually relatively quick for us. And then their ability to adapt to working from home and being productive was, I think, kind of blew us away in terms of like the expectations. We had expected that it wasn't going to go as fast as it did, or maybe they never would have been as productive. But what we're hearing from not only our clients, but obviously the people that we're working with, is that people seem to like it. They seem to be really efficient, and it really, the speed of adaptation, I think, was the most like surprising thing for us.
I think the engineering and innovation that's happened, during this time, and just like the creative ingenuity, really needs to be applauded, across all businesses, but, certainly in our industry, where we have delivered, television and feature work on a really grand scale. And, some of it we don't even realize it's, being released through the streamers, as we're home and we're consuming it. I mean, it really is a big feat that we pivoted and have enabled that to happen quite quickly to continue to entertain people. And I think that, it's going to be that mentality that we've had of, pushing the limit wherever we can, that's going to continue to propel us to whatever that new normal is that you had mentioned we're all striving for.
Yeah, I think the adaptivity has been remarkable, and as people have applied themselves to the new problems that are confronting them. Yeah, I think do you feel like you've reached the level of productivity that you had in the studio? You're seeing any impacts or any maybe departmental issues, editorial, well, that's a lot of data, that's hard to deal with, or as we said, final reviews, that we would usually have in the theater, those are problematic. Are there any lingering issues, or do you feel like across the board you've got a workflow that captures what you need to do at the level of productivity you're used to?
We're confident in our workflow these days. I mean, it continued to evolve gradually and naturally, and continues to do so. But I think the key thing that has been very apparent during this whole thing is that, we're protecting our livelihood here, and the level that the teams have jumped in to support and strategize and fix problems in short order has been truly incredible. From a management standpoint, from an artist standpoint, from production standpoint, from editorial, the level of engagement has definitely increased. And the amount of troubleshooting and teamwork has been increased substantially.
Yeah, I think for us, it's really about, our productivity we've done really well. I think it's maintaining that, like, depending on, how long this lasts and how long we can kind of continue, is it's kind of like what we spoke to earlier, which is that cultural piece. Like, what do we feel like we're going to lose by being at home and not having that connection? I think that's the thing that we've been really focusing on lately is, okay, now that we're obviously a few months into this process, what are we starting to see in terms of patterns, and how do we sort of try to get ahead of those in terms of maintaining culture and maintaining that, making sure that people still feel connected to one another. And I think that's the primary focus, is making sure that, because that just goes hand in hand with productivity and feeling part of a team. And that only creates better work. So it's really focusing on that.
Absolutely. I think with any new process, you get it up and running, so that it's working, and all the wheels spinning. And then once the wheel's spinning, you say, okay, how can we spin that wheel better? And how can we make it more efficient? And you start finding ways to, just make it better. So I think that, where there was maybe slight, losses in productivity, just sort of dipping to a new process, those were quickly shored up on our end. And, certainly it wasn't something that we wanted our clients to feel in any particular way. And, all of our deliveries continued at 100%. So I'm really confident that the team, will continue to perfect it as we move forward.
I think, Mike, you touched on something very interesting, the notion of what is culture for a studio. And a lot of it in the past has been tied into the physical infrastructure. We have a breakfast bar. We have beer Fridays. We have work-life balance. We don't. We have a concierge. We bring in dry cleaning. We have, a massage therapist that comes in. There's a lot of accoutrements and a lot of perks that studios use as a proxy for culture. And just that environment, obviously a lot of the studios here have very nice physical spaces that, have the posters that reflect their large body of work and things. What do those things mean in a future where we're widely distributed, where some people may never see the inside of that facility, may never be part of that, and their only interaction will be through these virtual constructs? What defines for you the culture of your studio, the underpinnings of your raison d'etre? Now we're getting philosophical.
Yeah, I'll have to Google that. The reality is that, when we have artists and teams of people working together, you're really talking about making sure that they feel like they're participating in something that's bigger than themselves, right? So it's working as a team. So I think that's up to our leadership, and that's up to obviously the production members. They're working with them on those projects to really steer a ship that is united and making a product. I mean, I think we are as artists and really as anybody that works in this business, we are heavily invested in making cool stuff, right? We are heavily invested in making. It's a creative enterprise. Everybody is employed to ultimately make great pictures, and I think that's what motivates most people that are in this business, is that they want to be part of that process. So the ping pong table, the foosball table, all of those things that are in the studio are great and obviously help. But ultimately, I think what people really like to do, myself included, is they want to participate in making something that they can show to the rest of the world. And that's what you really need to enable and allow people to do.
But then does that just come down to, sorry, but just to follow up on that, but does that just come down to the work then? Are we no longer tethered to a studio, but to particular projects? Is there nothing overarching that supports the notion of what a studio represents?
Well, I think you're obviously the work is super important, but it's the culture of how you create that work that's in the studio that is equally as important. And I think that's what we all, I'm sure we all strive to do, is obviously create a place where people feel like they're part of a community within the studio. The work is obviously just one piece of that.
Yeah,
sorry, Luke, you were saying.
I think that's exactly right. Our culture is what shows up on screen. The level of skill sets and disciplines and unique abilities that the team members have to to create these images and tell these stories is our culture. And so we need to remember during this time that we have to celebrate that. We have to celebrate ourselves and the shows that we continue to deliver and get out there for the wider audience to keep people entertained. And doing so on a regular basis, internally, virtually, to share our work amongst from show to show to show, to have monthly roundups so that everyone can see what everybody else is doing, so that we feel like we're still together and working towards the common goal and not in our show silos is a crucial thing. But I think now more than ever, our culture is our work and the work that we create.
Just to add to that, that's right. I think, each studio has their own, special sauce, right? And the way that they kind of bring it all together. And that really speaks to the culture, the personalities, and I think that the personalities shine through, whether you're, in front of each other or, literally, or in a virtual space. It's really, how you come together in a collaborative way to create that that delivers.
I think another aspect of sort of the evolving situation is we're probably all considering, all right, this is the new normal. What do we do to incrementally improve it? What do we do to, now it's up and running. What can we do to make it better? And I'm curious what all of you see as shortcomings in the current online collaborative environment. Where are the weak spots where you think, a better review? Yes, it's a question from Steve. Thank you. Where would a better review system that could synchronize, say multiple people and try and recreate that theater experience, or, a collaborative environment, I don't know, where the video conferences didn't feel so performative. What's the weak spot for you? What's the area for improvement in terms of online collaboration?
I think we've all kind of touched on it, and that's the theater experience that we all kind of crave and need for looking at our images, at the highest level of fidelity and quality, and to be able to collaborate that way. So what are we doing at the home? I mean, luckily, like a lot of people have some pretty good TVs at home. They can be deployed, and we can look at full res imagery in context with audio. And that has started to kind of circumvent that experience while you have the video conference up. It's not the same. It's, there's definitely some inefficiencies there, but it's continuing to improve. And that's one of the things that we want to ensure that we continue to progress with, is making that review system as robust, as similar as possible while you're working remote.
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest issue is that is the hallway and the water cooler, and how do you solve that connection that people used to make as they pass each other by, or they how do you facilitate that? How do you make that a part of when you talk about culture and you talk about that connection?
Yeah.
Because how much is born, like we really didn't know how much was born out of those conversations. And I think there are no
casual conversations anymore.
Right. So how do you really create that environment online to facilitate that and not make it feel forced, and not make it feel, and reduce the friction on that? I think that's a really important thing that not just our industry, but any business or any, like, kids, right? You take school, like, how do you do that at school? How do you manage that problem? And I think that's something we're all going to be facing. My hope is we can go back to work and in the office as soon as we can, but the feasibility of that is kind of up in the air. And so what do you need to do as a company to make sure that people can continue to have that hallway conversation, even though they're not in the same place?
Yeah.
Correct. And I would even say that, a lot of what shapes us and what we bring to the table when we come to work is our lives outside of it. And, being able to interact, whether it's through sports or other forms or entertainment, and, enjoy different, conversation, and sort of pick up ideas, from those aspects. And I think that, even though you try to have, family meetings online, or, meet up with your friends online, it again, there's that spontaneity that's lost, or that community that's lost from partaking in a group event physically that we haven't been able to facilitate. And I think that, it would be interesting if this did continue over, a year or two. But let's not go there. But if it did, just what the effects of that would be on our cultural product, which is, essentially what we're creating through entertainment. It would be interesting to see what that would look like.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see how art continues to reflect life as we go through this.
Right.
I think we all hope that, having forced to deal with this situation, we've adapted well. It seems that, all of you have touched on the fact that, you're surprised and encouraged by the fact that all of your artists and your technical staff and your production staff have adapted. And I think we're all hoping that as we go forward and hopefully the need to stay at home is lifted, we'll still be able to take the best of what we found in this new circumstance and bring it forward into the new, workplace reality, whatever that is. We're coming close to the end of our time. I just wanted to thank all our panelists for being here and thank all of you watching for your questions and your thoughts. One last thing. What last thing would you like to say or like to offer in terms of whether it's looking forward or reflecting on what happened? What for you is the big lesson, the big takeaway from all of this?
I just want to say thanks to our clients and to our staff for going through this with us and keeping work going and keeping people working. We couldn't ask for anything more. I mean, the fact that we're still able to work in such big numbers and in partnership with our clients has been just an amazing experience that I think, once we get back to the studio structure, this will be kind of a highlight in our memories in a sense.
Yeah, I think I would echo that same thing, which is like presented, this business in general and this community, visual effects, animation, we always seem to rise to challenges that are presented to us, and it really showcases just how talented across the board, right? From a leadership standpoint, from an IT standpoint, from a creative standpoint, we always seem to, someone puts something in front of us and we're able to jump over it and say, yeah, we just did that, kind of what's next. So I'm excited about the what's next. I mean, I think there's a lot of creative challenges that Hollywood and our clients are going to be throwing at us over the coming months and maybe years. So I'm excited about how we can take advantage of what has happened, as unfortunate as it is, trying to look on the bright side and look at the community and say, good job and hope to see you in person soon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Gratitude. Just thankful and grateful that we've been able to continue to do what we do. And just echoing those sentiments 100% across the board from, the artists and staff straight through to our clients. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, once again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time and having yet another video conference. I know you're not short of them, but I think it has been very helpful and appreciated by the community. Just a little boilerplate here before we go out. Just so everyone knows, this webinar was the first of a series that will happen year-long. We'll cover a variety of topics of interest to the SIGGRAPH community. SIGGRAPH 2020 will be fully virtual this year, giving everyone the opportunity to enjoy the top-tier conference in computer graphics and interactive techniques from the comfort of your home. So stay tuned for more ACM SIGGRAPH social media channels for updates about the conference and future webinars. Once again, thank you, Michael Ford from Sony, Luke Groves, Global Head of Production at Mr. X, and Krista Tazio-Morrison from Deluxe. Very much appreciate you joining us today. Thanks to all of you watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope we'll see you all again soon, in real life as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.